This might be actually my most interesting video to date. I think knowing the shape of your video light is key. To get that knowledge, I've created the setup to showcase the cross-section of each of my lights with all my modifiers. To do it, I've used 2x2 meters neck, very thick material that basically eats the light. The neck has been placed in parallel to the ground, and each light has been located perpendicularly to the edge of the neck in the middle of it. So it looked like that. This is the neck, this is the light with the modifier. They've been placed like that relative to each other, and that way you can see the cross section of the light on the surface of the neck here. Light and modifiers were placed with their middle to the edge of the neck to showcase the biggest cross section. So not like that, not like that, but with the middle of the modifier in the middle of the edge of the neck. You are going to see Aputure 600D with original reflector, Godox reflector, and with Godox barn doors. Also with F10 Fresnel at float and spot, then the same light with Lidon 3 and Lidon 150, both with different diffusions, with and without grids. And also original Aputure lantern, one with a diameter of 26 inches or 66 centimeters. I forgot to include my beauty dish, which was actually the reason I've created this video. Damn it! Then you can see Godox F600Bi with just a softbox, original crate and custom-made crate. I also wanted to test my tubes and smaller panels the same way, but unfortunately the rain has ruined my plans. So there would definitely be part 2. But next time I might mount the neck vertically and the smaller lights below it, which should be easier to set up and film. And the power of the lights here might seem quite surprising, but this material does not bounce light, quite the opposite, it eats the light. That's why they are not very bright at high power settings. It was much brighter to my naked eye than to the camera set at 3200 ISO. This was filmed with 12mm full frame lens at f4. The neck has been installed around 140 centimeters above ground, and the camera has been another 160 centimeters above the neck to be able to register its whole area. So the whole setup has been very demanding to build. It took about 1.5 hours, so you have to give me a like already. Here is the original footage with the original commentary. Sorry for the background noise, but someone had a birthday party in their backyard, and this has been recorded between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. And again, please remember that the neck is absorbing the light, so it does not bounce much of the light to the camera. You might be surprised how dim 600 watt fixtures look like, but this is due to the characteristics of the material. So do not draw conclusions on the power of the light, but rather look at the shape and the light fall off. You can use the chapters to skip between the lights and different modifiers. So I have a neck prepared, this 2x2 neck, and above the neck I got a camera which is kind of perpendicular to the neck. So if I put a light here, which is also perpendicular to the neck, and the neck is leveled both directions, so if I blast the light here, then so you can see the shape of the light produced. Of course, some kids are jumping on a trampoline at 10 p.m. but anyway, you can see the shape of the light, and I can change the intensity of the light. And at the moment I have the Aputure 600D with standard aputure reflector. Anyway, and I hope my battery in the camera would last, because it is really hard to get to that camera. It is like 3 meters above the ground, and the neck is around 1 meter and 20 centimeters, maybe 1 meter and 30 centimeters above the ground. maybe 140. Anyway, I have to have the neck that high because my biggest modifier is 150 centimeters in diameter, so the half of the modifier is 75 centimeters, so the light have to be at least at 80 centimeters, and actually I don't have the stand which is small enough to use that height, so this is almost the lowest this can go. That's why it is quite high, and it's getting freaking windy, unfortunately. Anyway, this is the standard reflector in Aputure 600D. At the moment it's at 12%. You can see the shape and you can see the light fall off, and the neck is 2 meters wide and 2 meters long. If I change the intensity, you can see the light fall off. Of course, that would be, the ray would be overexposed, but this is the shape, and I'm recording at 3200 ISO in A7 IV and recording to the Atomos. Anyway, this is the shape. You can see it's a cone. They say it has 45 degrees angle. It seems like it is 60, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's 45. Anyway, that's the shape, and you can see there is a hotspot in the middle. That's why Aputure 600 and Aputure lights got really high readings with this reflector, because it creates the hotspot. Okay, now I have a Godox reflector, and it seems the angle is a bit different, like it's wider, and also there is some halo around, but that might be the actually reflection, some reflection in the lens. So anyway, that seems a bit different. So Godox reflector, and I'm going to 100%, and there is definitely wider, and that's why there are reflection in the lens, because actually the light is going up to the lens and creates the flares. So definitely wider, and I think there is smaller hotspot in the middle, and of course the hotspot is wider, and you can see the fall off of the light with that reflector. So I think it's very important. So that's the shape. Okay, now it is again Godox reflector, but this time I have put barn doors, and the barn doors have a grid inside, and the light shape is totally different. You can see how limited it is, and actually there are almost no flares because the light is not going up. Unfortunately, there is a lot of wind now, so maybe I won't be able to record this, but I will try my best. So now it's not blowing, so that's the shape with the barn doors and the grid. And I will try to shape a bit the light with the barn doors in a second. But I have to push the light back to be able to open and close the doors. Now I have removed the grid and I got barn doors only. So that is the shape. And if I use the barn doors, you can see how this changes the shape. And this, so there is like double triangle. It's this kinda interesting shape, and I can like close it almost completely, but there is some spill above the top and down doors. So these doors does not have leaves outside, so that's why there is some spill, and there is this crazy shape. So this is how this looks like. These doors are almost closed, and the horizontal ones are closed as much as possible. So that's the shape with the barn doors and the Godox on the Godox reflector, and I can adjust them. They are really hot now, and you can see how the shape of the light changes really hot. Now I have F10 Fresnel installed on Aputure 600D, and I think that's the float position, and the shape is different than with the reflector. There is no hotspot like this really thin hotspot, and some light is spilling to the lens so you can see the flares, but actually the shape is quite uniform and interesting. So at 2 meters at full power you can see that it is wider than 2 meters, so I'd say it's float. Interesting shape. Aputure 600D with Fresnel. So now it is the F10 Fresnel with in the spot position, and you can see the shape is totally different. It's like much elongated, and there is a definitely a hot spot inside. So I hope it won't rain soon because my camera would get but I think this camera is weatherproof, but any of the lights are not. So that's the shape with F10 Fresnel. Much thinner shape. I don't have a barn doors for the Fresnel, but you can see how it's different than in the float position. I'm not checking any positions between spot and float because basically that would be a bit wider or a bit thinner. So you can imagine there would be something between one and the other. So 600D with F10 Fresnel at spot. So this is kinda a dissection of the cone which this light creates. And now there's a lot of wind, that's why the shape is changing, because the neck is bouncing in the wind. Okay, now it is LiDOM 3 with 2 stops of diffusion, no grid, and it's pressing against the, it is pressing here against the neck. You can see it from above, and that's the actual shape. So this at 16%, this at 6. So at full power it is definitely wider than 2 meters neck, which is kind of surprising, I think. So now we'll attach the grid and see what's the difference. And the light seems kind of uniform. There is a fall off here, but the natural thing with inverse square law. So yeah, that's the LiDOM 3 on the Aputure 600D. Okay, now it is LiDOM 3 with a grid, and this grid is supposed to be 40 or 45 degrees. I'll check in the specs later, and you can see that the shape is totally different than before, like a lot of light is cut out. So this 100% is not totally perpendicular to the neck. Now it is. So at 100% the shape is totally different. Like before, the whole backyard was lit, and now the shape is totally different, and the fall off is also really abrupt. So that's what the egg crate is doing to your light. And of course you have to imagine that that's the cone, so the light produced by the softbox has a cone shape, but this is the dissection of this cone, and that's the shape in actually in every direction, because the light is circular. Very interesting. So I wonder if there would be a difference with different diffusion, but I will check anyway. So now I will swap the diffusion and see. Okay, now it is one stop diffusion in LiDOM 3. No egg crate, as you can see, and the light is 8%, so definitely there is more light. Is shape different? I'm not sure. There might be some specularity to this light because this one-stop diffusion is like a magic cloth or something, so it allows some hard light from the COB to get out, but I don't see any hotspot, so I think it's a kind of the rumor. But you can see the shape of this, and then when there is much more power, like the whole neck is white, like maybe here is some light fall off, but other than that it's all white. So not sure it's different. For sure there is more light coming out because the diffusion cuts less light, so that's the main difference probably. I don't see any difference hotspot, but I have to compare them on a big screen to be able to say. So now I will touch the grid and see how different it is. Okay, now it is light on 3 with one-stop diffusion and a crate. So I think the shape is exactly the same as before, although if I pump up the light to the max, then you can see there is more light because there is a less diffusion, so less light is cut, so more light is going out of the modifier, but still it does not lit whole neck, although I'm looking at the neck, so it seems that the almost whole neck except this part is brightened up by the light, but this is still, there is some light fall off here on like 10 centimeters, and then the rest seems to be totally black. And actually this material is a real neck, it is eating light, that's why I have to pump up the light really high. So again, that's the shape, light on 3, one-stop diffusion and accurate. So switching to LiDAR 150, that would take some time. Okay, now it is LiDAR 150. I have to push the yoke up a bit because this modifier is sagging on a balance mount. So the light is now directed a bit up, and still modifier is not perpendicular, so I will have to adjust it once more. But this modifier is huge, so let's see. Okay, so now light on 3, I think it's a 2 stops diffusion, and you can see how big it is. There are 25 centimeters on each side of the neck, and that's the light, and the shape is produced, so the whole neck actually is brightened up by the light. Even the corners are lit almost fully, so this is how wide it is. So you can imagine how much you can lit with this modifier, although since it's a big modifier you lose a lot of light, so there is a lot of light, like the spread is wide, but the light is not as strong as with reflector, for example, or smaller modifier. So now we'll attach the grid and see how much the grid changes. And this is 100%, this is 9%, this is 4.3. So you can see how this looks, what shape it produces, and how this changes with the power. This 50%. I'd say it is very interesting to see what is actually the shape of the light produced by this modifier. Okay, Sidus links have to reconnect. So now it is LiDAR 150, 2 stops of diffusion and a crate, and this highlight you can see it's the rod of the neck. So this this does not create a highlight, it's just a reflection in the rod, and this at 6%. So like I can see the neck is brightened up, but since it's eating a lot of light due to it being really black and fluffy, I'm adjusting the power. It's 20%, 30, and you can see that the shape now is totally different. And I can see in real life that like the whole neck is lit except that much, like this much is this area is totally black, but on in the camera it seems that like this part, like lights and here, it's not really true, but the shape is like you can see on the screen. So this actually 100%. So LiDAR 150, 2 stops diffusion and a crate. So I will change the diffusion and test both with other diffusion and crate. It seems that maybe clouds are gone, but it's still really windy. Okay, now LiDAR 150 with 1 stop diffusion. It is at 1%. So I think it's a huge difference versus the 2 stops. And 25%, 50%, 70%, and 100%. Like everything is bright now, and there are tons of insects everywhere. Fortunately, anything beat me, but okay, I know. Anyways, that's the shape with LiDAR 150 and 1 stop diffusion, and I will attach the grid, and that's actually a good test if that wind, if anything could fly off. Anyway, that's the shape with the LiDAR 150 and 1 stop diffusion. Now it is LiDAR 150, 1% with the grid, so it looks like everything is black, but it's not in real life. And the wind is just crazy, so probably that would be one of the last modifiers. Maybe I would try to bring another light, but probably won't happen. So that would be just part 1 of this test. But this is LiDAR 150 with 1 stop diffusion and a grid. And again, the light pattern is different than without the grid. But I think between both diffusions, it is kinda similar. This is 30%, so it's 30%. And for some reason I cannot change power anymore. 50%, but of course you have to take in mind the lens is at f4 ISO 350, and there are really awesome night butterflies flying. I've never seen one like that. It's all orange, but LiDAR 150, 1 stop diffusion and a grid. Okay, so I think this last modifier for 600D. This is the original lantern, and it's at 3% at the moment, and everything is lit. And I cannot change. So going up 30%, 50, 70, and 100. everything is lit, like everything is bright here. So since it's really late, I would tame it down. So lantern lights everything, and I cannot adjust the power. 30%. Everything is really bright with lantern. But there is also some kind of the cone shape, as you can see on the neck. Okay, now it is Godox F600Bi with custom crate, because I got this configuration. So you can see how the light is cut. Is 4x4, so 121 by 121 centimeters. LED panel at 14%, 22, 50, and 100. And actually this part of the neck is not lit because that grid is cutting out the light. I press maybe the grid too much. Okay, so now the grid is not mangled, so it is at 100%, and 50, 24, 12, 3%. Like I can see in real life that everything is lit, but in the camera it seems like it is totally dark at 1%. So I will remove the grid. Okay, now it is the panel without any grid. It is at 0.1%, and actually you can see already the light at 0.1. Is 5%, 10%. It is bright. 20%, 30%. Maybe police would visit me for blasting that light. 50% and 100%. Everything is freaking lit here. So Godox F600Bi without any grid. Everything is lit, even corners. 5%, 0.5, 0.0. Oh. This is 1%, so there is kind of the circle. Interesting. Okay, I will attach the original grid and see how this looks like, and there are $1 billion. Okay, so now it is Godox F600Bi with original grid at 1%. And this original grid is not as bad as I thought, but still now you can see how much light. Yeah, it seems like it is something around 80 degrees based on the look on the hedge. So definitely different than the custom made one, which seems to be, I don't know, maybe 50 degrees, maybe 40 as advertised. But this one is definitely sloppy. So at 19%, I mean, in real life, everything is lit on the neck, but you can see what is the shape of the light. This is 8%. 6, 5, 2, and 1, and 0.5. So the original grid works too, but does not work that great. After reviewing the footage, I can say that the light shape with different diffusions and same modifier is the same, but with lighter diffusion, light travels farther at the same power. So the shape might seem bigger because it's brighter, but generally the shape itself seems to be the same, just bigger, usually longer. I do not see any pronounced hotspot with lighter diffusion, even though the lighter diffusion seems to have some specularity to it. Grid seems to cut the same shape of light regardless of the diffusion for both LiDAR 3 and LiDAR 150. And LiDAR 150 creates wider beam of light and it's much more uniform than LiDAR 3 shape. It also seems that light travels a shorter distance, but it is because the power of the light is the same, but the light spread is much wider with LiDAR 150. So the same amount of photons travels into much wider cone of air volume. That's why it seems dimmer at full power, and no surprise here. Looks like Godox F600Bi produces more uniform light compared to LiDAR 150, which is bigger. F600Bi is also more powerful, even though both lights are 600 watt LED fixtures. The difference is not very visible in the test shot, but in reality it is much brighter than 600D and LiDAR 150. For F600Bi, custom grid gives much more control over the shape of the light versus the original grid, but after the experiment I know when to use each of them. Light is cut much more abruptly with the custom one. Seems that the angle of the original grid is around 80 degrees, while the custom one seems to be actually as promised around 40 degrees. The shapes of F600Bi with custom grid versus Aputure 600D with LiDAR 150 and a grid are also quite different. F600Bi creates almost perfect cone, while LiDAR 150 is some kind of the barrel shape. Especially close to the light, shape is much more narrow and uniform for F600Bi. But Godox panel seems to illuminate much more of the background because it is much more powerful than 600D with LiDAR 150. And actually, it seems that LiDAR 3 with a grid creates a wider beam than F600Bi with a custom grid. I think it's the most surprising result. Then the original grid for Godox F600Bi creates a much wider beam than LiDAR 150 with its grid. For different reflectors, you can see that the original Aputure creates a hotspot in the middle and the Godox one produces wider light rate, which is more uniform. Godox reflector is actually Godox flash reflector, creates an almost 90-degree beam with not much of a hotspot in the middle. Aputure reflector is around 50 degrees, but the hotspot is really visible. For the reflector and F10 Fresnel, seems that F10 at float creates much more uniform light than Aputure reflector, no hotspot. 600D with F10 at the spot also has a hotspot, but this is a desirable characteristic of the spotlight, which the name suggests. So if you want to illuminate just your talent, you can definitely do so with F10 at spot setting. I will definitely try to create a second part with my tube lights and other LED panels. Maybe when I test smaller lights, I would actually set the neck vertically and the lights horizontally under the neck, because such a setup might be easier to build and film. Anyway, for me, this experiment is very useful, Now I know the shapes of both of my brightest lights with all the modifiers. Hope it is also useful for you. That's it and cheers, mate!